Hello, everybody. Welcome to this special webinar with Jessica Bendinger. I'm Phil Galasso, Director of Marketing for Final Draft, and my guest here is Bring It On writer Jessica Bendinger. Jessica, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Phil. Great to be here. Thanks, everybody, for joining.
Yeah. The main reason we're here is because it's the anniversary of Bring It On this year, and you've written a book about it. Tell us a little bit about that.
I wrote the Bring It On book, when we receive written by attribution from the Writers Guild, we are allowed to publish the screenplay to our work. And I knew about that right. And I had long wanted to exploit that right, but it just felt like a little, I wanted to do more than just the screenplay. And I thought the 20th, what better time to kind of unpack process a little bit, talk about some tools and tips and give a little more context now that we have some 20 years later.
Yeah, that's great.
Seemed like the perfect time to do it. So the book is basically my version of how to outline. I'm a big fan of outlining. That's a hard one position to be in. Like outlining was something I hated. So I'm a fangirl because I had to become a fangirl in order to help my process.
Now, it is the anniversary. What was it, what was it like going back, in the context of bringing on writing this book? Talking about writing in general, yes, but also, in relation to that movie.
Yeah, it was quite a trip down memory lane. Let me tell you, I include some deleted scenes or extended scenes with annotations in the book, as you'll see, and I put little text bubbles, and some of it's mortifying. Like I wrote it, I was like 29 years old. It was a long time ago. I sold it in 1996 and I wrote it in 1997. So it's even more than 20 years for me, and was certainly in my life for a long time. So yeah, you're face to face with your immaturity as a writer, your inexperience as a writer, your, let's call them time-stamped choices, because you're making, a movie for a moment. And so a lot of stuff was time-stamped in a way that was very self-confronting and uncomfortable, but we're all human. And my heart was in the right place. And I knew what my intention was with those mistakes. So, you got to forgive yourself. But yeah, it was a little self-confronting. And I'm showing you behind the veil. I'm showing you a process that isn't completely clean. Like, reading the outline, I'm showing you the outline I read aloud to pitch the movie. And that is painful at times, reading that and knowing how many times I did it. It's kind of no wonder maybe that we had as many passes as we did, or I had as many passes at that moment. But yeah, that was miraculous, but also how much stayed intact from the outline. If you read it, we kind of bolded what in the outline stayed through the final cut. And that's in large part thanks to Peyton, who really loved the vision and got on board and, did such a kick-ass job directing and embracing the vision. But it's kind of incredible. Like the movie wasn't developed really that much. It was developed very minimally, which is also incredible.
That's a rarity. So you mentioned Peyton Reed, the director.
Yeah, he just called me, by the way, to wish me good luck on this.
Nice.
So,
we can
blame him for the partial delay.
One of the things that it struck me about the movie, rewatching it, is the tone of it is so singular. And can you talk about, putting that tone in the screenplay and then, working with Peyton to really, have that be a part of the finished product?
Well, tone is something I talk about in the book quite a bit. And tone, this is the hardest thing, right? This is the thing all screenwriters really struggle with, because a lot of a screenplay is performative, right? You're kind of performing the story in words for potential filmmakers, buyers, et cetera. And so where are we in that? Where is the voice and the tone of the movie in that? And that's a very nuanced, sometimes in my case, it was very like balls to the wall, forgive the analogy, like very like, here it is, this is it. This is camp. This is high camp. It's got heart, but it's really campy. So he saw that. I mean, that states itself from the opening cheer. I am saying, we all know how you feel about cheerleaders, and I know I'm going to be fighting that every single page of this script. So I think owning the complications and complexities of the subject matter you're tackling right up front can really serve you, and it did for me. And as I say at the very end of the Bring It On book, which I had a copy here, is really tone is about centering what matters to you. It's being willing to take cheerleading and hip hop, as crazy as those two things are, putting them together and saying, yeah, this is what I'm committing. I'm committing to this. I'm saying, I like this. I'm saying, pay attention to this. That's very stressful sometimes, right? Because you're worried if people are going to like you or like your subject matter. You have to kind of push that aside and go, what I care about matters. What I am focused on and obsessed with matters. And that's where tone comes from, is in really respecting what you love enough to clear space for it and put it down. And I think that's why the blank page is so anxiety provoking for us, because we're telling you what we care about. We're revealing, it's very vulnerable to tell you, I care about this weird thing. And so I think that self-consciousness, which most writers have, I certainly have it, I'm no exception, can prevent us from finding tone sometimes because we're worried about what people will think. And I think if we're really honest about the psychology around tone, it lives, our inability to find it lives in our inauthenticity, performing something rather than really saying, yeah, I like this. I like weird stuff. Here it is, right?
So you meant, like, along those same lines, what was it about the world of cheerleading that, you know, drew you initially to writing this project?
Well, for those of you who've seen Stick It will not be surprised. You know, I was a gymnast, and I was a failed gymnast because I grew 6 inches in one summer. And so I was suddenly throwing tricks and falling on my head, which was devastating to me. So before I switched to basketball, I paid attention to cheerleading because they did tumbling. Tumbling was valued in that kind of subculture. So I remember being on, being on break in college, being on my aunt's couch in Paradise Valley, Arizona. And she had awesome cable because they were sports fans. And I remember just like, that moment in college when you're exhausted, you've been in your dorm, you've been in kind of skank world with like no laundry, like you're not doing your laundry, you're not eating right. And I just went into couch. I became one with the couch and the remote. And I was watching ESPN and I watched the competition and it had tumbling. So I was like, oh my God, I loved it. Then it was like, there was another one and another one and another one. And I think like 5 hours had passed by the time I realized I'd watched all these competitions, but a little bit of an obsession was born for me because it scratched that itch. It scratched the itch of my own missed dream as a child of being able to be a gymnast. I missed out on that a little bit. And cheerleading kind of was like a fun, I think if you look back in time and look at Gwen Stefani and Avril Lavigne, and they're kind of, I'm just a girl and girls are tomboys and tom bomb, that whole moment, I think I was experiencing that earlier. I think I was feeling that earlier. And so that's why I loved cheerleading, because it was like, yeah, we look like girls, but we're doing really hard stuff. And something was dazzling about that to me.
Well, that definitely comes across in the film, that sort of excitement. And even the Eliza Dushku character sort of has that same sort of journey where she thinks it's not so cool. And then once she gets in there, she's really into it.
She's with the audience. She's kind of speaking for the audience and for me, because I didn't think of myself as, it's dorky to be so enthusiastic, right? When you grow up in the 80s, the Be Really Cool Breakfast Club 80s, or even the 90s, it wasn't cool to be enthusiastic. And so there was a self-consciousness I had to address, because there is something so pure and innocent and sweet about cheerleading, that you're just yelling for something you believe in. But at that moment in time, like it wasn't the coolest thing, right? But I was determined to make it so, because I knew I was like, there's something here.
Yeah. And talk about then the hip hop side of things, because the movie is very much a story of cultural appropriation and these two different, communities. Talk about like what first drew you to that and like weaving that into this story.
Sure. Well, a couple things. First of all, I have to say I was very blessed as a kid to have a mom and dad who centered and respected and revered Black culture. So I grew up in a house, like my dad had thousands of jazz albums and, Miles and, Charlie Parker. It was very much Black culture was revered is the best word I can use because it's true. And my mom played traditional jazz. So she's a traditional jazz trombone player. The roots of trad jazz, as they call it, are New Orleans. Mm-hmm. My dad's biggest account was Popeye's Fried Chicken. So I was somebody who benefited directly from Black culture because my parents worked in spaces that were, in a way, benefiting from cultural appropriation, for lack of a better term. Here I am, this white kid whose public school in Connecticut couldn't be preppier, by the way, middle-class Connecticut, it was very middle-class school, but summers in Chicago, also pretty middle-class. And there my parents are working in these arenas that have been influenced by and exist because of Black culture. So just as my 10,000 hours, as Malcolm Gladwell said, had happened by the time I was in 7th grade. And then going to Columbia, which is, again, a famous institution in Harlem, there I am reminded again of how of the contrast of what's happening here. I'm kind of starting to ask questions and be even more aware. Columbia famously, when I was there, did a sit-in to protest investment in apartheid in South Africa. So also I'm seeing that in the student body. Things are starting, that moment when you realize like, oh, the Thanksgiving story I learned in 2nd grade was totally wrong. Like, right. We all have the genocidal awakening about the roots of America, right? Particularly for indigenous cultures everywhere. Anyway, so there I am having these dawnings, and I started interning for Spin Magazine when Public Enemy was on the ascendancy in New York. They were very influential, and I was asked to cover Public Enemy. You can imagine that I loved hip hop, and here I am I'm aware again of this. I am being employed writing about something very different from me. But if I don't write about it, it's not going to get covered. There's no one else covering it at the magazine at that moment in time. And I was still in college. Hip hop wasn't a Grammy category. So I was really lucky. I was really lucky that I had a mindset that just knew there was gold, and knew that it was a quality worth sharing with people. I love hip hop. I love this stuff. I was very enthusiastic about it. So I made a lot of my own opportunities, but I also valued and centered Black culture in a way that's probably unusual. And certainly in hip hop, there was a lot of chatter, and in music in general, as far back as rock and roll, music in the culture has constantly been appropriating and sourcing from Black culture in America. So that was already in me from having been in music journalism. That's something we talk about a lot. So I was just really lucky in terms of my timing and being around the right kinds of influences to kind of let this marinate in me and come out.
So one other thing that really struck me about the film, watching it again after, it's been quite a few years, was, and I think one of the main reasons, if not the main reason it has stood the test of time, is just the characters. They feel as real today as they did then. I mean, pop culture references aside, things like that. Can you talk about your approach to writing characters and these characters, and why do you think they have held that test of time?
Yeah. Well, first of all, if any of you remember, I mean, I'm aging myself here, but we had Almighty Isis was Saturday morning TV, and Shazam before it was, so I wish somebody would do the Almighty Isis.
Just a matter of time.
Right? So Almighty Isis, I just was the only woman with power that I saw growing up. And Wonder Woman and the Bionic Woman. Okay, that was a lie, but she was one of the first. And so Isis, I always thought that was a cool name. And from a writing perspective, is like the words mean a lot to me. And naming, I use behindthename.com when I'm naming my characters, because I like to think about what the etymology of their name is, what it means in culture. So Isis was originally in the earlier drafts, Isis and Torrance were much more like drag queens. I mean, it was really like drag camp culture. Torrance was influenced by Gwen Stefani. I had a picture of Gwen over my desk while I was writing that. I had a picture, I'm trying to remember, I don't know. I had a lot of, Vaginal Davis was a Black drag queen that I talked to get some drag terminology, a very famous, performance artist and very revered back in the 80s and 90s, kind of like a punk drag queen. So that's what I was thinking about, was drag. And like, how can you have these high school kids kind of going through this journey, but make it cool? And that's what we landed upon. I mean, that's what I landed upon as a tone for them. And then it was really, again, standing up to the cultural tyranny of performative femininity, thinking about you judging me as a cheerleader. Like, I have to dismantle that before we even get started. And then, as you see in the fever dream of the opening, she's going to be exposed in the movie. So the opening, that anxiety dream, is really a metaphor for the whole movie, which is, I know everything you think about me. Hate us because we're beautiful. Well, we don't like you either. And then she's exposed. So it's like, she knows something is up. It's not just the fear of becoming a cheerleader. She knows something is wrong. And then the movie takes you on the journey of righting that wrong.
So, you found this world of cheerleading. How do you write cheerleading sequences? What was that like in the script? Or was it more something that was sort of hinted at in the script and then, choreographed and developed?
Oh no, they were written. I mean, like the opening, Let Me Clear My Throat by DJ Kool was the song. And that sample is what you hear. And God bless Billy Gottlieb, the music supervisor, who took that, as you'll see, if you read the script, you'll see, I think I name checked Let Me Clear My Throat. I worked in hip hop. I directed hip hop videos in New York. I wrote for Spin Magazine. So of course the music was really important to me. And then I just wrote them thinking of music videos. I directed a Queen Latifah video. I directed a Steady B video, who was an MC from Philly. I had directed a couple hip hop videos. And so the musical choices were key. And I wrote them as I was thinking of them as musical numbers, and as I would think of a music video. So they were written kind of, as you'll see in the book, if you read the book, I think Peyton did an amazing job of elevating what was on the page and making it pop. And,
just talk about the actors a little bit. I talked to a lot of writers, and, it always comes up that, you write it one way on the page and then an actor just brings it to life in a way that, in a great way that you could never have imagined. And this movie has an incredible cast, Kirsten Dunst, Gabrielle Union. Can you talk about what it was like, from that, spark you had to then seeing these actors bringing your words to life?
Well, it was incredible. But first of all, we did a reading. There was a different director attached before Peyton. And we did a reading, and Gabrielle played Isis in that reading. And so she was always Isis. Like, she was at that reading. And by the way, the script was in a slightly different condition. It had much campier drag stuff in it still, which I kind of cleaned up for the subsequent draft, and we weeded it out. But Gabrielle was there, and Missy, Eliza Dushku, was there. So we were really lucky. And then I was a co-producer on the movie. We were greenlit before Peyton was signed on. So I got to go to a lot of the castings with Joseph Middleton. Joseph and I flew to Florida together to scout for cheerleaders. Kiki, we offered it to her and she passed at first because she was doing another movie. And then Marley Shelton was going to be offered the part. And then Peyton reached out to Kirsten again, and she said yes, mercifully. And she's just phenomenal in it. She brings so much heart and warmth, and she's really riding a tone tightrope, with her performance that's pretty magnificent, as is Gabrielle. I mean, the authenticity, she's so grounded. And as she said in many interviews, she was 10 years older than Kirsten. So that gravitas that she brings to the role is so important, and really, like, what a blessing. I mean, phenomenal. And Jesse Bradford, by the way, huge Jesse Bradford fan. And I loved King of the Hill, the movie, the Steven Soderbergh movie he'd been in. And I remember sobbing watching him eat paper, steak, and potato. And there's a scene in that movie when he's like eating paper. And couldn't get it together. I just lost it. It was such a beautiful, painful scene. And so it was so great to have Jesse, who brought a whole, kind of cute emo boy intelligence to the part that wasn't really an archetype yet in the culture. And similarly, Eliza, who had that knowing thing. She'd been a child actor like Kiki, and she has this real knowing quality to her that is just so, so masterful.
You talk about, there's a thing with teen movies where sometimes, they talk like they're 20 years older than they are. And these very much feel like teenagers, like, real teenagers. I mean, obviously there's heightened dialogue and stylized dialogue and things like that, but just their relationships with each other, it all feels very real. Were you just drawing upon your own experiences, or how focused were you on making sure that those things felt real and not artificial?
Well, I think Peyton did a great job of grounding. He said he felt like a camp counselor directing at times, and he really, I think, grounded the proceedings. For me, I will say this. I was very much raised by gay men. Like, I was a model from a young age, gay men who were, around quite a bit in my family and in my life. And so to me, teenage girls and gay men are very similar. They're both obsessed with boys and clothes, and like there was a real kindred thing there. So I always often tell people, if you're confused about how to write teenage girls, just think of gay men and then you're good. And I say that lovingly. So to me, I really wasn't thinking about it that way of like, they need to sound high school. I was writing the movie I wanted to see. And I was writing them the way I wanted to experience comedy and life, as a woman who felt often minimized, often marginalized, often, pushed to the side for what I had to say. So I just thought it was funny to have these very bossy, bitchy, slightly angry. I mean, they're kind of pissed, they're irritated. It's like
anger is one of the things that stuck out to me, because I remember, especially like Eliza's character, just, thinking like, oh, the world, everything sucks. And, you just have to go on with it. And they all have that sort of like cynical attitude that you don't get till much, you don't earn till much later in life.
Yeah. But in a way, I mean, the high school I went to, everybody was super bitter, like at a very young age. I think, I don't know. I think it depends where you grew up, and it depends on your family of origin and a lot of things, right? But I found we always wanted to be older than we were in high school, right? We wanted to think we were very sophisticated and we were clueless idiots, but we, it was cool to be a little snarky and not impressed. That was the 80s, right? That less than zero.
You're over it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So taking a little bit of a step back, can you just talking about writing process in general. So you mentioned that you're a big outliner, but take us from the beginning of an idea to putting words on a page. What's the process, and how has it changed?
You'll see how much is involved. How much has changed for me since Bring It On to now? Yeah. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Well, I'm just curious if your process has evolved over time, from when you were a younger writer to now, or if it has mostly stayed the same.
Well, I hope it has. I think, look, a lot of my talents and abilities are baked in now. That's just 20 plus years. I mean, I've been a professional writer for many years. Because I was a writer before so I've been in the business since 96 in the US. Before that, I was working in France. And then before that, New York, blah, blah, blah. So it's a long time. So a lot of the stuff gets baked in and you don't think about it anymore, which is nice. And a lot of it's instinct and muscle memory at this point. But I will say what I do trust is, and I encourage all writers to trust, is your private viewing window on Google. It's the thing you don't want people to know about that you would spend hours researching, or if you had to go to a city to research something and could just get lost in it. that kind of curiosity and listening to your idea and trusting your intuition and trusting that what you like matters and like really getting to know it and dating it and romancing it, that is still a big part of my process. And I'd say even more so now. I really, when you are pitching too early, when I pitch too early or talk about an idea too early, I start to get defensive about it because it's maybe not all there for me yet. So I will be more general now. I'll talk about an arena if I'm going to survey or just see how people feel about something. But I try to keep it precious. I think magic happens in a hat. Mm-hmm. And really, it's going to be you and the page, or you and your writing partner in the page. And I treat that like a relationship. And I know that I have to invest in it. I know I have to make time for it. I know I have to have my well filled up. I have to be good night of sleep, a walk in the morning with my dog, do my journaling, my gratitude pages. I mean, I have a big morning practice that I do that really cleans the slate, gets me ready, and then allows me to be present to the magic of creativity and the wonderful privilege that is to get to do that for a living, right? I take that seriously. And I try not to have distractions. Sometimes I like a little music in the background. Sometimes I like a little white noise. But really it's about, okay, if I'm going to get into bed with this idea, if I'm going to marry it, date it, whatever I'm doing with it for a while, that requires thoughtfulness. So it's really showing up for the work in a thoughtful way. And that can look different depending on what I'm doing. Like right now I'm researching, I have my little good luck charm here. I got a challenge coin from somebody in the military because I'm researching this project that involves the military. And I had to drive to Encinitas for 2 hours. I had to sit with him for 3 hours. And this is, by the way, weeks of being vetted to even get that meeting. Sure. Drive to Encinitas. I'm tired when I get to Encinitas. And now I have to sit. And I don't know if I'm going to get 15 minutes or 3 hours. I got 3 hours. But you're tired, you're thirsty. You're like, okay, I got to get hydrated. I need a bathroom. Like, life happens while you are in your creative moment. And you just have to address those things and try and be open and available. I mean, I had a funny moment with this military guy because it was COVID. It was in July. I drive down to Encinitas. Encinitas was shutting down. And I said to him, I hate to say this to you because I'm late, but you have to help me find a bathroom. And nothing was open. And so this military guy is trying to help me find a restroom. But great stuff came out of that. So I would say the younger me would have been too stressed and freaked out and anxious and like, oh my God, this guy. And I probably would have racked my body for 3 hours rather than bring the reality of it into the mix. But I said, look, I'm so sorry, and a whole nice chapter happened from that. So I'd say be present to yourself, be real with other people, and be thoughtful about treat what you're into like it's something you want to date. Because you're not going to get paid for a while, potentially. So let's make it about pleasure instead of this like tortured artist, like, look, if discipline, I say in the book, tools, not rules. If discipline works for you in a way, like if that kind of hammering works for you, great. Doesn't work for me. I need carrots. I need goodies. I need soft blankets. I need to put my feet up. Like I tried to do that kind of hammer work style and it hurt me. I hurt my back. I had bursitis in my shoulder for years of not monitoring my body while I was working. So long way of saying my writing practice has evolved to include me. We've got to take care of ourselves. And there aren't a lot of great role models teaching us how to do that. Liz Gilbert's a pretty good role model, but nobody talks about this.
Yeah. I mean, it makes me curious. So it sounds like both mental and physical wellness is something that as a writer, you find particularly important to have.
It is not important. It's necessary. Because here's the thing, Phil, that I found out the hard way. For those of us with trauma in our childhoods, and I'm not going to trigger anybody here, we don't need to get into it, but I have, I'm in Al-Anon. I grew up with a lot of trauma in my family. Everybody meant well, but shit happens. And because I'm an only child of divorced parents who was shuttled around quite a bit like an army kid in a way, I can dissociate. Most writers have a very easy dissociative tendency. You can go into your head, you go to your imagination, it's your safe place. Now, some people are fine and they can eat and maintain mental health wellness and physical wellness and dissociate. I'm not one of those people. I would check out and then I'd come to later, I'd be writing like, and I'd be like, oh my God, I can't move my back. Oh my God, I can't move my neck. Oh, I haven't had water. So I had to train myself out of some really toxic habits with my mental health and with my physical health and just my emotional well-being. And because I was so like, oh my God, I got to do this. I had that stress that we all have when we want to do a good job, but it went toxic for me. It went really toxic. And I went too far in one direction and I had to learn how to bring myself back to balance, learn how to bring myself back. So I talk about that in the book a little bit. You have to I need carrots. What am I looking forward to? I've been looking forward to this all week. Mm-hmm. So this was a real carrot for me to say, okay, do a yoga thing this morning, stretch, make sure your body be in good shape for this. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to come to you hagged out. Like I wanted to come with something to give and share. Yeah. And that requires filling the well every day with little things, right? So we don't get trashed. I think writers are we can self-harm accidentally. Sometimes, we can isolate and focus and you keep an eye on that. We got to keep an eye on that.
Yeah. I mean, the isolation is something I definitely hear from lots of writers and, keeping track of your emotional state, making sure you're not veering too far in one direction or the other is a difficult thing to do.
We need to talk about this more and we need to kind of raise our hand and say to our friends, be vulnerable and say, hey, could you check on me? Like, could you check on me later? Like I'm working on a project and I'm nervous, or set little self-care alarms for yourself. I know it sounds cheesy, but it's important. It's really important.
I was talking to a writer recently and he was sort of lamenting the fact that, the screenwriting community specifically oftentimes is so competitive that people don't necessarily aren't there to support each other in a way. And he mentioned he has a group of people who he is sort of his support group and stuff like that. I'm curious, is that something you have? Do you have a few people who you feel comfortable sharing material with and just generally sharing your experiences with for support?
Yeah, I think that person was really. That's a very honest statement. And I think I have allies and friends who I've made over the years, certainly because we've been, we're all battle scarred from decades in the industry in a very tough, very unforgiving, beyond unforgiving, indifferent. It's an indifferent industry. And so I will say that I have some allies in the business, but there is a weird old tension there because we've all had to fight so hard for what we have and where we're at. But I love, like Kiwi's a friend of mine and who wrote, 10 Things I Hate About You with Karen. And I've known Dan Waters for years. He was a real ally and mentor to me. Larry Kirby, I've known for years. Mark Waters, Dan's brother. Those are, really old friends of mine, but we all operate in isolation, right? And we don't see each other that often because of that. So, Dana Fox, who was a mentee of mine, I just checked, we just had an email exchange. I adore lots of the writers. We just don't see each other that often. And I think his comment was accurate. I think TV writers, because they're in a writer's room, there can be a lot more camaraderie and certainly the vibe descends from the showrunners. So we know of shows, like The Good Place was like heaven on earth. And there are shows and showrunners who are known for being kind of benevolent mystics of just like good vibes. And I think Vince Gilligan has a pretty spectacular reputation. And we need more mentoring. And then conversely, we've all heard horror stories of unchecked, whatever, the human journey of too much too soon or unchecked power. Maybe you haven't had time to work on yourself, or maybe you're really operating from ego instead.
That's very diplomatic.
Well, listen, we can't shame people. Here's the thing about cancel culture, everybody. We need a healing alternative. We're all human. We all make mistakes. If this had been now, the Toros would have been canceled and there would have been no movie. She's shamed and humiliated incrementally, but not in such a way that she's fight, flight, freeze. She doesn't have trauma from it. She can survive it and move on. And I think that's an interesting model for us to look at. If cancel culture has value, that's not to say, look, it is important to call people out. I just wish we had a thoughtful way to do it so healing can happen. Because if you just freeze somebody into trauma, we're just re-traumatizing people. Mm-hmm. Trauma, we have enough trauma, this win-lose patriarchal thing we've set up. We've valued capitalism, making money, all this stuff at our own expense. So I don't know. I want to center win-wins. I'm much more of a matriarchal storyteller. So, and for any of you who've listened to Mob Queens, and if you haven't, please, I encourage you. Good. But, I talk about in the final episode, patriarchal storytelling is win-lose and matriarchal is win-win. And I think we need a little bit more of that in the culture right now.
I don't think it could hurt, that's for sure. I want to talk about you mentioned you wrote for Spin, you were a journalist. How did you transition from that to screenwriting?
Very clunkily, very, very awkwardly and very clunkily. I have said before, I had the great good fortune. I went from Spin Magazine to MTV News back in the days of Kurt Loder and John Norris, and I wrote for those guys. And I saw we used to have these electronic press kits, they were called, before digital, and you'd get this giant 3/4 inch tape, which weighed a ton, and you'd put it in this Sony RM440 and hit play. And I got the Say Anything electronic press kit. I was tasked with writing that piece for Kurt. And when I was watching it, I saw Cameron Crowe had been a music journalist and had come, and I was like, oh, there's a path, I can do it. So it was very clunky. It was like, okay, the thought went in, and I was like, how do you do that? And so I just started asking around. And by the way, this was back in the late 80s, early 90s, I guess. I don't remember when Say Anything came out.
It came out in 86. So
86? No.
I think, or maybe 89.
No, it couldn't have been because I wasn't at MTV then.
It was
89, maybe 89. Yeah. And anyway, long story short, I'd taken a screenwriting class. I didn't like it. I didn't want to go to grad school. I didn't want to take a GRE. I hated school at that point. And so I just watched movies and tried to read books. Somebody gave me, the first screenplay I actually physically read was Adventures in Babysitting. Oh. And Chris Columbus had written, it's a very conversational style and the action description, which had a huge influence on me. And then what did I read? I mean, that was big for me though, that moment. Mm-hmm. And then I met Maria Semple, who was the daughter of, she had a book called Where'd You Go, Bernadette, that has, been a movie, and she's quite a storied novelist now, but she was a TV writer. And before she was a TV writer, she had been working in Hollywood. Her dad, Lorenzo Semple Jr., wrote Papillon and The Parallax View. And so she was I clung to Maria because she was Hollywood adjacent, and I felt like I could learn from her. And so she was very kind and indulged me and helped me along and gave me some advice. But what I also learned was you got to back then you really had to figure it out. There weren't all these resources that we have now. It was very much like the Wild West and no internet.
Yeah. So what was finding people like that, finding mentors and people with access to the industry, that was important for you along the way?
Well, I was so hungry to know the inside scoop, and having been a journalist, I figured, well, let me see if I can try and figure this out from treating it like a story rather than, and I think that served me. Because I ask good questions. I'm a good listener, and I enjoy hearing what other people have to say. And that has served me really well. I am genuinely curious. My curiosity has saved my life so many times, because when you're in an awkward situation or you're uncomfortable or things are tense, generally the right question at the right time can really help. So I don't know. I really sought kindred spirits, and it wasn't easy or comfortable, but I just kept doing it. And I had enough connections. I met Dana Gould and Beth Lapidus early on through Uncabaret. Beth was very supportive and encouraging to me. You find your allies and you nurture those relationships. You really want to tend to them and feed them. and give. That's the thing. Give. You have to give. Keep giving. Read people's scripts, offer to do stuff. You know, I remember reading a job. I got a job in France, and I got a job in France because the guy who sold the show had shown me a spec script years earlier that was terrible. I mean, not great. And I was blowing it off and really irritated that I'd agreed to do this. And I was like, you know what? Knock it off. Everybody starts somewhere. Take a seat, Bendinger. Like, just sit down and go through this with him. Patiently gave him notes. Wasn't a bitch. Wasn't an ass. Did it in a nice way. He gave me a job.
Yeah.
So, you know, you never know. I'd say, like, be a good person. Be a good person. And if you don't know how to be a good person, learn how to be a good person. I try every day. I don't succeed every day, but I really do try. So try to be a good person and give what you need. If you need somebody to read your script, read some scripts.
That would be a good person would be a good note to end on, but we're going to keep going for now. So we've talked a lot about, you know, writing and, you know, the path, you know, a story takes from, you know, the initial spark to putting words on a page.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, you know, as a feature film writer, you're writing on spec a lot, you're pitching a lot. You're then working with producers and executives developing stuff. So what are your experiences there with pitching and developing? What have your experiences been? What have you learned through that process?
Well, I haven't pitched. Bring It On is really, I pitched Bring It On. Let's see, did I pitch any movies since I've pitched one other thing. I've mainly written on spec. So Stick It, I wrote on spec. I didn't develop it. Bring It On, I pitched and sold and then wrote. And then I did a ton of rewrites. I went through like 10 years of just being the green light queen and did, you know, worked on 20 movies in a row, some of which I'm credited on, most of which I'm not credited on. And I think I enjoyed, I mean, that period was getting a PhD and taking notes. There was a period where I really just preferred, just tell me what you want and I'll make it good. Because that was easier fixing broken material and more interesting to me from my curiosity point of view as an engineering mind. So pitching, I don't love. And I say this in the book, I read off the page. I would take the notes and I would refine the pitch. And so it got better and better as I went along. Pitching's hard. I don't love it. So I tend to prefer to write on spec and get feedback from whoever I'm getting feedback from as I go, because I feel like my point of view stays intact. And for me, and this is again, know thyself, be a good person and know thyself. And to thine own self be true. I perform a little bit. I'm a performer, as you can tell from our conversation. So if you give me a note, I want to please you. That's not always the best thing. And so I learned early on, I remember there was a great studio. So pitching television is very different than movies. Movies, you work on the idea and you get the notes after your draft. TV is inverted. You're getting a ton of notes up front before you do the pilot. And so I'd written like a tragic pilot that just sucked because I was performing for everybody's notes up front. And I suddenly realized this doesn't work. And I said to the executive, Peter Johnson, God love him, at Fox, I said, look, if you want a good pilot for me, don't give me any notes. Give me a blind deal. Let me just write whatever. And then I'll do your notes on the end. Trust me, I am a weird pony. Like, I'm going to perform for you and everybody will hate it. And he said, sure. Okay. And he, God love him, I had the clout to do that back then. I don't know that anybody would do it now. But I wrote Zoolander before Zoolander. I wrote a script about two models who got community service and were horrible people. It's like Schitt's Creek and Zoolander. A little ahead of its time. Nobody got the script at all. They were like, what is this? They're awful. And I was like, it's funny though. It's funny. But people don't get my stuff. And here's another thing I want to tell you guys. Nobody understands my writing. Nobody liked Bring It On. Nobody liked Stick It on the page. They don't get it. I know it'll work and I need a partner who will know it'll work. But I've written so many scripts since then that I think are awesome. And people are like, oh, I don't really get it. It's so performative. And it's like, yeah. Have you seen Bring It On? Like, yeah. I've been doing Schitt's Creek for a long time. Like, yeah, it is. So anyway, sometimes you have to do the missionary work of getting people or have a team that can do that for you, of getting people comfortable. with your style. And clearly people are very averse to my style of screenwriting. So if you're getting bad notes, don't worry. It happens to the best of us.
Since you brought it up, what the rewrite work you were doing, those, green light passes, like what was that work like for you?
As I said, I think if the beauty for me with script doctoring, which is it's very different from generating original. So I just want to be very clear. When you're script doctoring, it's a very different vibe, but I like that vibe. It gives me a little bit of detachment. I can look at something that's not mine. It is like being a doctor. You're diagnosing, you're seeing what works and what doesn't, but you're not attached to it. In a way, when I've written it, I'm really attached. And so I'm looking at it through a different filter. And there's something, I could probably do it with my own work now. I just have to put it down for a while. So when you're script doctoring, it's like this. For me, I see the holes. I just see where the holes are. I write my notes. I say to them, this is where I see the holes. And usually they say, yeah. And they'll add, but a lot of times development executives and studio executives, here's the thing, they may have a feeling without knowing what the solution is. So oftentimes you'll get a note, and that's that great saying, the note behind the note. What's the note behind the note? You have to become, I think that period in my career helped me become more empathetic about notes and how challenging that can be. And also less precious about it. I used to be so defensive and reactive and still am, I'm sure. I'm still super sensitive and how dare you, You have to get over that part of yourself and treat it as an engineering task or surgical task, a fixing task, and be not egoic about that, but just yeah, how does this get better? How can I make this work? How can I make this flow? And that was fun for me. I enjoyed that.
That's cool. Before we do have a bunch of audience questions. I do want to just ask you one more thing. How important for you has representation been in terms of an agent and a manager for you? Have you had good experiences, bad experiences?
Yeah, I was with the same agent I had the same agent for a really long time. So Greg McKnight was my agent for a really long time. When he moved from CAA to UTA, that was not our relationship had kind of drifted a little bit. And then in all candor, when he moved to UTA, that wasn't a great move for me. So when the WGA had us terminate our representatives last year, I think that's a really important moment in history. I would say this, look, agents are salesmen. They've been elevated to a place that's wonderful for them and certainly has value. But I just want us to take a step back for a moment and take a deep breath. They're salespeople.
Enough said.
We collectively, right, given that greater importance than the work itself. Now, I'll say there's been a lot of disruption in Hollywood. Obviously, legacy media companies have suffered mightily because they cared about their own pipeline more than the content in the pipeline, right? No industry, the slide rule industry is never coming back, right? And when industries have this radical transformation and radical disruption, it can leave some of the architecture scratching its heads and looking around going, hey, where's my BMW? Where's my valet? What happened? Feeling blindsided. I think legacy media's ability to adapt to what's been happening has been slow, as we know, with Disney Plus just popped up last year. Streaming has been around for a while, right? Hulu before that, but I don't think, and by the way, streaming residuals for the Writers Guild, not great, right? New media terms are not the same as theatrical windows, VOD windows, the corridors, the grand corridors that used to exist to be monetized are going away, if not already largely gone, right? As anybody who's getting a residual check before and after can tell you. So what are we going to do to adopt? And I think it's interesting that the WGA, now that the returns are diminishing and the agencies were profiting I think disproportionately to what was happening in the industry at large, right? The WGA finally said, hey, enough. Like, we were working for the agencies rather than vice versa, right? So I think the times are changing. I think it's great if you have an agent you love, wonderful. If you have that relationship, fantastic. I think they can have value. They can help you access talent, and certainly the legacy media companies that are still around value those relationships, and those are important. I don't currently have an agent. I have a manager and I have an attorney, and that's it. I keep it simple. But I'm in a different place in my career, so that's enough for me.
I think that makes sense.
Does that answer your question?
No, it absolutely did. I mean, like, you bringing up the different media landscape now versus 10 or even 20 years ago made me think of obviously the news this week about Quibi shutting down to literally no one's surprise. But I was reading about how they got around guild guidelines by making their 7-minute episodes, which were essentially acts in what would have been a 30-minute show. You put credits after them instead of commercials, and all of a sudden you don't have to pay certain minimums, and you get around all sorts of stuff. So it's a whole different landscape now.
It is. And we're all going to have to change, including the guilds. There's going to be there's more change to come. I do consulting for tech in addition. So since 2015, or even before that, Stick It had 40 million that we know of illegal downloads on YouTube because, and I lobbied for copyright in 2018 with Chris Weitz in DC on behalf of Creative Future. And I spoke on Capitol Hill. And what I said was, my movie was the best of times and the worst of times. It came out in 2006. It was #1 on iTunes when it was released on digital for 7 straight weeks. Then YouTube, then iPhones, and it was the perfect storm. So the 40 million downloads we know about, probably more, because this was 2008, right? And it went to #1 again on iTunes in 2008. It outperformed by every metric you could imagine. Here's the problem. Legacy media and Hollywood does not pay attention to data. So I wrote a movie and directed a movie that crushed it, statistically crushed it across every category. Guess what? Crickets in Hollywood, because they weren't paying attention, right?
Yeah.
So it's this interesting tension we're in, where we're suffering because of technology in terms of legacy media, and we haven't quite figured out the future yet. So that's why I did Mob Queens. It was like, okay, let me own my IP, let me make the show for audio. And then I had 6 incoming offers from everyone, Lady Gaga, Amy, everybody wanted to play Anna Genovese, the heroine that we talk about in the show. And I didn't have to pitch it.
Yeah.
Because I'd already pitched the arc of the show over 12 30-minute episodes.
Yeah. I think, that brings up a good point. And, it is one of the questions that we received. I see a lot of writers now, they have an idea for a film, they have a script for a film, but rather than just send the script out, they'll do a podcast version of it. They'll try to get it published as a short story so that it exists as an IP that you can point to when you go to producers with that script and say, hey, this podcast was getting X amount, thousands of downloads per week. There's a built-in audience for this material. In a situation right now where existing IP and being able to leverage an existing audience seems so important to producers and production companies.
Well, it is interesting that because it seems important, yet they're not necessarily mapping it to data. And I know this because of my consulting for tech, right? I worked on a $650 million allocation at Verizon. And Verizon, by the way, who tried to do the bite-sized content, they knew it wasn't going to work. It was a $500 million. They deprecated a $500 million allocation. So we knew Quibi wasn't going to work quite a few years ago. I would say, what is the question? Sorry.
No, just about build like you did with Mob Queen, like you did with Mob Queen, sort of having that built in.
But here's the thing: Mob Queens was 4 years of research. So we had about at least many hundreds of thousands of dollars of sweat equity into it. We'd pitched it to all the TV outlets. Nobody wanted it. We then spent 11 months and quite a bit of money. Easily, the show was over $500,000 to produce, a lot of money per episode to make the show. So then it was, you know, debuted at number 11 on Apple, had great press. You know, we were nominated for a Webby Award with The Dropout and Dolly Parton's America. So it was a great experience, but it was a lot of work. So just like rattling something off, that's not going to work. You have to be thoughtful. I also have I have a system I use to make sure there's audience for what I do. So I'm not going to work on something unless there's proof of audience. So I'm very much audience facing, whereas most of Hollywood is more industry facing. I'd say, you know, agencies and studios are very interested in each other. I'm very interested in audiences. So, and that has served me well, right? There's a reason there are 5 sequels and a musical, Bring It On. There's a reason Stick It had as many downloads as it did. And if you look on TikTok, like Stick It still has cultural impact today, which I'm very proud of. But my industry hasn't been as thoughtful about that and isn't for some reason paying attention to that. And I don't know why entirely.
Yeah, that is a mystery. All right, so let's get to some audience questions. I'm going to jump around a little bit here. Some of them are writing specific, some of them are a bit more Bring It On specific. So we'll try to find a balance both. And I apologize to viewers, listeners that we can't get to everybody's questions, but we'll try to do as best we can. So the first one I have is, about you're in the middle of a story and you're writing, and how do you, if you're getting lost, how do you get yourself out of there?
Oh, that's a great question. It happens all the time. And I talk about that in the book. So we get lost for different reasons. And so I think one of my favorite sayings is content is king, but context is God, right? So if you are in your content and you're getting lost, you're generally forgetting the bigger context of your story, or maybe the context of the audience. Where is that's an orientation. Orientation is an orientation problem. So I would say, if you are lost in your story, stop, put it down, and you have to step back and remember what are your big beats. And you might not have outlined as well as you thought you did, is another reason. When I get lost, I usually rushed through a section of my outlining and I skipped over and I was like, oh, I'll solve that later. And then I'm in the middle of the second act and I'm like, what is happening? Where am I going? So I would step back, look at your outline again, remember where you're going. And that will help orient you. It won't solve it, but it'll at least you can be mindful about where you're going. And you might need to redo your bricks on the path in that direction. You might need to just sweep them away and look again at the gap between where you're standing in the story and where you want to be and retinker.
I think that makes sense. The next question's about research. And I know we touched on, that you're really into research. I'm curious just if, what else might be involved.
I am team research.
So beyond just like diving deep into the subject matter, are you someone who, watches movies that are other movies or shows that are in the same arena? Just expound on that a little bit.
I used to do that. I'm a big nonfiction person because I like to not be as influenced anymore by other people's stuff. I'm finishing Schitt's Creek, which I keep invoking right now, but I'm watching The Vow on HBO. I loved My Octopus Teacher on Netflix. I'm really a fan of documentary and nonfiction books, nonfiction articles. I prefer that. However, I love, I admire The Crown. I admire all that period stuff. And I enjoy it, but I might go back in time to look at stuff for influence. I actually have I don't like to do that because I want to be fresh to myself. And I feel like you're going to maybe accidentally, I don't know. I haven't done that lately. If I need to watch a movie, like I just was in, I can't say too much because I signed a very aggressive NDA, but I was up in the running for 5 months with for a very big franchise to direct it. And I had to watch a lot of big movies from that company that makes very big franchises. And so that was necessary for that project. But otherwise, no, I try to pull my influences from other places to make it fresh.
Got it. So the next question I have is, and you talked about this a little bit, that you consider your outlook sort of audience facing. On the page, what does that mean for you? Like, how are you trying to make, what kind of impression are you trying to make to a reader on the page? What are you, any tips you might have? And I know this is in the book, obviously, as well.
Yeah. Well, look, I enjoy, as you'll see from the book, I'm like, come here, let's talk. Like, I'm very folksy in my screenwriting. I'm trying to establish some intimacy and rapport with the reader. That works for me. That doesn't necessarily work for everybody. Yeah. Yeah. Ask it a different way. I feel like I'm not coming up with a good answer for you.
No, I mean, I think that makes sense. It's just about, writing styles from writer to writer are often so different. And, you read some people, I think you summed it up perfectly when you said you're folksy and you say, come here. I think that is really what the answer to the question was looking for.
I think there's somebody, there's that famous saying, write it for a friend, like pick somebody in mind that you're writing it for. And I think I try to do that. Like, I have a friend, I really like Noah, who's one of my favorite people to show my work to, because he's so sweet and like he gets all my jokes. And I think of Noah quite a bit when I'm writing, and Kate at The Blacklist also has read stuff, and she's been very encouraging and supportive, and we just get each other. Like, we have a really good vibe. So I think of Kate and Noah sometimes when I'm writing, like, who are the people who delight in your humor or delight in what you have to say or who you enjoy talking to? And I do imagine them as an avatar, actually. Like, would they like this? I like it. Would they like it?
I think that's a great way to think about it. Like, who imagine who you want reading your screenplay and how they might react.
It's an intimate thing, and you're asking somebody to read. It's like, nobody loves reading. This is the thing. It's an ask, and it's hard. So make it, how do you want to be treated? Write to your audience the way you want to be treated. And so I try to do that.
I think that's very cool. Next question is about characters and their backstories. How important is that to you? Do you have extensive backstories in mind when you're writing characters, or is that something that you don't think about as much?
That's a great question. Varies. I think it varies. I think I do tend to jump in. I think I do a lot of thinking and I think I tend to jump in more because I've studied psychology and neuroscience. I've done so much nerding out about why people are the way they are. So I'll say this, I have way more than 10,000 hours in understanding how people are built and why people are the way they are. So it's kind of fun for me and maybe easier for me at this point to know, okay, they were traumatized repeatedly as a child. So they have, I think in terms of trauma. Actually, are they fight, flight, freeze? What's their predominant reaction? What was their childhood like? Were they yelled at? Were they coddled? I try to have some general things just when I'm building them roughly to lean into, like, are they an asshole? Okay, if they're an asshole, like Joanne and Stick It is an asshole. Well, she's an asshole because her mother's an asshole. And her mother is an asshole to everybody all the time. Like, she's never known anything else. So of course she's an asshole. So you should know why somebody is the way they are. These things don't happen in a vacuum. So I will say this, I hate it when there are stereotypical characters where you're shaming them on the page. You better love your villain as much as you love your protagonist. I love Joanne in Stick It. She's an asshole, but I love her. And I love her because I know why she's an asshole. So think about those things. You should love all your characters and you want to know why they are the way they are. So do as much work as you need to do to get to that point.
And what about, when you're developing relationships between characters, what do things change as when you bring a new character into the equation, what changes?
Yeah. And obviously they're built to catalyze each other and spark off each other. I'm a big fan of attachment theory. If you don't know about attachment theory, it is everything when you're talking about relationships and interdependence and interrelatedness and anti-dependence. There's a lot of different categories, right? So Attached, The Science of Attachment is a great primer. There's some more sophisticated books on attachment. Sia Furler, who I quote in the book, Sia of Chandelier fame, she talks about complex PTSD, CPTSD, in her interview with Tim, which is fascinating. And she talks about a guy named George Haas, who I've been meaning to read his stuff, who talks about complex PTSD because it affects attachment. If you were, look, secure attachment is 50% of the population, thank God. And then there's the rest of us who are anxiously attached, avoidantly attached, or the push-pull. And so knowing those basics will really help you with your interdependence and your characters.
That's a very thoughtful way to approach it. Next question is, you've written a first draft. Now what? Where do you go from there?
I take a long walk. I've written a first draft. I put it down for a minute, unless I'm on a deadline. But I put it down, and then I think about who is going to read it. Am I going to pay somebody to read it? Am I going to hire a writer's assistant, a script coordinator? I have some people that I love who I respect. They get my humor. What is it? Who's going to read it? Is a producer going to read it? Is my manager going to read it? Is, my friend going to read it? It depends. So then I will have somebody read it, and I will get feedback from them, paid or free or otherwise. And then I will think about whether I agree with that feedback or not. It may take me a while, and I may not agree with the feedback. And so I make a decision accordingly, but it depends. If it's a deadline, then I'm like, have a tequila and a potato chip and, walk your dog and do a dance. It really depends on the context, but you should celebrate. You should put it down, take a bath, pat yourself on the back,
treat yourself,
whatever that looks like. And, be happy you hit that milestone, because that might be all you get. I worked on a musical about mental health called Psyched since I've been working on it since 2010. 50 songs, and I was very ahead of the curve in terms of talking about mental health in a way that I'm proud of, but nobody wanted to touch it. A song about eating disorders. Are you kidding me? Nobody wanted to touch it. And, oh my, so many drafts, so many people have read it, so many versions, the movie, the stage, the TV show. I love it. I still hope I get to do it, but it's just very touchy right now. People are very touchy. Understandably, we're having a big course correction, a moment of awareness and reckoning for everyone. But it's hard. Sometimes you write something you love and no one gives a shit. Often that's the case, sadly.
Are your first drafts, some writers refer to their first draft as a vomit draft. It sounds like yours might be a little bit more refined than that.
Yeah, it is a vomit draft, but I'm a tight 90. I'd like to be under 90 for my first draft. I've learned from experience that I'm going to have to kill darlings. So let's murder less. I like a tight, short first. If you are drifting and drifting and drifting and drifting, go. You know what? Don't waste my time with your long, drifty draft. You are in vomit. That's great. And we all need to be there, but get it down. Get it down before you ask somebody, are you sure you need all that? Are you being a little precious? Write some more things. That's the thing also, when you're being precious, you're not writing enough. I've written thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of pages. I can't even tell you how many pages I've written. Thousands. Thank God. I'm very lucky. Some of them paid, many of them not. So you're not writing enough if you're feeling that precious. Sorry.
Are you someone that has? It sounds like you have several projects going at any given time. Do you find bouncing back and forth between them helps you find momentum?
It varies. Focus is great, and then sometimes diversity is great for me, or having a poo-poo platter of things I'm working on. It really varies. Mob Queens was so all-consuming, and we were in a new medium, and it was so much work. Plus the standard of being Nancy Drew non-journalists, but we still had the legal stuff to deal with, because Stitcher was there was legal stuff we had to be mindful of. So it was a wonderful, thrilling, educational PhD we got, but it all consuming. There was no room for anything else. Whereas now I'm kind of drifting between a couple outlines, looking at things.
Next question we got is, have you had experience working with other writers, and do you enjoy that, or are you more of a solo person?
It depends. Yeah, I mean, Sex and the City was a writer's room, and that was fantastic. And you know, the late great Judy Toll, who was a dear friend of mine, was in that room, and Greg Behrendt was in that room. So that we had stand-ups in the room, which was hilarious. Michael Patrick King, who is a stand-up himself. So there was a hijinks in that room, which was awesome. And then I haven't been in a writer's room really. I've done a lot of punch-ups on movies with big round tables. Famously, the most expensive round table in history was for a movie called G-Force, an animated movie, and it was a Bruckheimer animated movie. And I went to like Jeff Nathanson's here, and you know, everybody who was. It was crazy how many big names are in that room.
You got to make sure those gerbils have good dialogue.
I believe they were hamsters.
Oh, my bad.
I don't. Guinea pigs.
Oh, there we go. So we've got a few sort of more bring it on specific questions. Yeah. First one was, what was the experience like seeing it become a musical?
Next question.
All right.
It's an honor. It's fun. It's fantastic when your work has that kind of longevity and you're the mothership and you've birthed all these spaceships. That's wonderful. That there's huge economies are born on the back of your hard work. Wonderful.
So next question is just about the ending, and you know, this particular person and myself included always loved the ending, and it's not the typical ending necessarily for this story. Was that something you always had in mind, or is it something you toyed with? Was it something that was pushed back on?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You see from the outline. It's in the outline of the, you know, that I pitched, and it never changed. And when I got pushback, I would say Rocky didn't win in the first Rocky, everybody.
Yeah, people forget that.
Tended to shut everybody up. It won the Oscar, and it was a huge movie. So what is everybody worried about? And that you should shut people up.
Next question is just a little, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, but maybe we can just talk a bit more. Just the process for writing the cheers. I mean, you mentioned, you know, we talked about that a little bit earlier. But...
Oh, yes, let's talk about that. So some are original and some I had learned and were kind of in the culture a bit. So the opening cheer I wrote myself very quickly. That was fun. Then the one line in the opening, I'd say my friend David Coleman in New York, shout out to David Coleman. Had been working on something years earlier, and he said, hate us because we're beautiful, or we don't like you either. And I wrote that line down, and I was always looking for a place to use it. And so that was the hardest. I kind of had to build the cadence of the cheer around that line. So there was that. I love the SAT cheer, which is on the extras, by the way, as well. And that was original. Let's see. Birds Cold in Here is a step that I saw at a demonstration at Columbia. It was a demonstration of stepping by Black fraternities. And I saw this team come out and they did it. And I was like, oh my God. So Black men, a group of young Black men taught me Birds Cold in Here. Let's see. The You're Gonna Pump Our Gas Someday was the Northwestern cheer at Big Ten games because they would often lose. So that was famously a Big Ten cheer from Northwestern. Awesome. Oh, wow. Like totally freaked me out was Kayla Alpert taught me that. Thank you, Kayla, TV writer and pal of mine. What are the other cheers? Oh, the final cheer at the end. So in the night game, that do our shit, you'll look like shit because we're the ones who are down with it. That was in the pitch. So that was mine. There were some revisions at the top of that cheer. What else?
I think that covers it.
Did I miss any?
I know.
That's kind of it. Yeah.
You're the expert. I'm going to defer to you there.
It was a process. So some were original and some were learned.
So last, bring it on specific question, and this is actually can be applied a little bit more generally as well, as the movie has just such great dialogue, and you know these characters make these really witty pop culture references. What is your approach to dialogue? Are you someone you mentioned you're performative? Are you someone who like talks your dialogue out loud? You're talking to yourself, or?
Great question. I'm a big believer in reading your scripts out loud. And now you can record yourself and listen back, and you'll hear where you're off the rails. I mean, it's just such a great talking it out loud, recording yourself, listening to it. Does it make sense? If you don't have the support you need in the reading, that can be a great tool. doing readings of it with actors can really be invaluable. But yeah, I do believe in reading it and reading it out loud as much as possible, because it is a spoken medium that's on the page. You know, screenplays are recipes for other things. So it's great to kind of get it into its other mode as much as you can while you're figuring it out.
And in terms of, bringing on, but also generally, like, what's your approach to, like just jokes? Is that just a smell test sort of thing, or like, can you veer too far into too many jokes? Like, how do you find that right balance between, making people laugh?
There's no such thing as too many jokes. Look, if you have too many jokes, good for you. That's great. Yes. You can always pull back. The problem is when it's anemic. You can always pull back. If you have too many jokes, good for you. Like, enjoy all your jokes and save them for another time if you don't use them. Like, we had a character who got cut named Coach Shelton. There's no coach. May she rest in peace. I talk about her in the book. And I saved her for one. She was a Mrs. Cheerleading America cheerleader. I love this idea of an older woman still cheering. It just seemed wrong, slightly wrong. And her joke was, I can't wait for the day I'm looking forward to the day when cheerleaders have cheerleaders. Now, I love that joke. I stand that joke. But it wasn't, no. So you cut things, you lose your darling. Maybe nobody else likes that joke. I don't care. I liked it and it didn't make it, but it was there for a long time. Just go for it. Why are you holding back your jokes? No, you try to be as funny. I mean, this is a satire. So Bring It On is in social satire, right? As is Stick It. It's not, there's heart. It's not a full, I'm in the kind of Michael Ritchie school of it's pushed reality. It's not like a comedy. So you have to know your tone and know, but yeah, always have jokes. Keep your jokes. Right?
I like more jokes.
More is more.
More jokes, the better.
Yeah.
So, okay, just a couple last things before we wrap up. Obviously, we're in a time right now where a lot of crazy stuff's going on. A lot of us have been, basically quarantining in our houses for the past 7 months.
Yeah, it's crazy times, hard times. I hope everybody's doing as well as you can be expected.
Yeah. How have you managed to, stay creatively motivated?
Well, as writers, we're uniquely positioned to do well. Like, I think the first couple weeks I was like, oh, this is I'm so used to this. Like, I'm sure many of us felt that way. And then you're like, oh God, like I'm really craving some human connection. And like, you're seeing friends and you're doing elbows. And like, when was the last time you had a hug from, a grandparent or a parent or somebody you value, right? There's some weird things happening when you're not quarantining together, at least for me. So my dog has been doing a lot of my emotional support animal has been here. But yeah, it's challenging. I think I've been valuing Zooms and also fatiguing from Zooms. I've been trying to connect and be of service and do as much giving as I can. So whether just remembering that there are people out there who need help. And if I can provide that, I want to provide that, whether that's doing a Zoom or sharing with vets for the WGA that I did on Wednesday night. It was so fun. Just give when you need, give. That's my solution for needing and feeling sad. I just try to give. And that seems to work for me.
I think that's really, really wonderful way to
get out of your head. Like, we're so in our head as writers, right? And can be a dangerous place.
Yes.
As they say in Al-Anon, like, don't go in there alone. And, try and be in the world, try and be of service. That sometimes is the cure. Just help somebody out.
I think that's great advice. Last thing I want to ask you, and we've kind of maybe touched on this, but you've been at this for a while now. You've been a writer for a long time. Is there something you've learned along the way that you wish you could go back and tell yourself just starting out?
Yeah, I think bigger grains of salt. Take it with a grain of salt. Take a breath. Just take a breath. We're all lucky to be doing entertainment is such a privilege. It's necessary in the culture. We perform a valuable function, but it's also a luxury good. And I think we've all been so scrappy and working so hard to do this career. Sometimes you forget that again, content is king, context is God. Zoom out, look around, remember no one cares at the end of the day. But people will remember how you made them feel. And unfortunately, for better and for worse, we all have good days and bad days. And so I look back and I go, God, I just wish I hadn't been so in my head or so cut off from my feelings because I had to push through. And maybe I was a little harsh with this person or a little harsh with that person. I look back and of course it's the feelings that I hurt unintentionally that I feel badly about. The ones that I was intentional, I'm okay with. No, you know, we have good days and bad days, and this can be tricky. But it's the feelings. If I hurt people's feelings, I'm sorry. If anybody needed to hear that, I hurt your feelings, I'm sorry. I probably didn't mean it. And if I did, text me. I'll clarify for you.
And for the few that you did it intentionally, don't text.
Well, if you're confused, I'll clarify for you. So look, there's some really, you have to be tough in this business. And I have been tough at times, very tough. I have a reputation as being tough because as a woman in this business, I had to be. I don't know that a man doing the same things that I did would have gotten that criticism. And that's hard to swallow at times. It really is. You know, we have huge gender inequity in this business. We have diversity and equity in this business. There's a lot of problems in this business, and the business itself is going through a problem right now because of what's happening with the industry. So I don't know, we're all doing the best we can. Right. But it is a privilege at the end of the day.
Yeah, I know. I think do the best you can is probably a good note there. Is there anything you want to leave people with about the book before we sign off?
No, I mean, I hope you enjoy the book. We're on the playbook.official on Instagram. Also, you can find me on Instagram. Just DM me. I check my DMs. Please be appropriate in the DMs. And, yes. Check out Mob Queens. We are going to be a soon-to-be series announced. Very exciting.
Yay.
With a very exciting star and a very exciting producing partner. So that'll be great. And then, be safe out there, everyone, and try and be a force for good.
I love it. Thank you, Jessica, for your time.
Thank you so much, Phil. Thanks, everybody.
Take care, everyone.